All right, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for your patience as we get our tech up and rolling. Okay, just give us one more second. It says it's muted. I'm good. Okay, great. So we've got a couple different screens on. Okay, thanks everyone. My name is Zoe Burkholder. I'm in the Department of Educational Foundations, and together with my colleagues, Danae Davis, who is here from the Department of Teaching and Learning, and Rachel Garver, who is online from the Department of Educational Foundations, and the tremendous support of the Dean's Office, including Professor Vinny Alfonso, who is here with us today. We're presenting another lecture in our series on critical scholarship at CEEL. So thank you so much for joining us. We are very excited for today's presentation, which is called Transformative Learning in an Anti-DEI Era, Africana Studies, Education, and High-Impact Practices. This is going to be a presentation by our colleague at Bloomfield College, and this is my pleasure to get a chance to introduce her. Dr. Leah Tonnette Gaines is an assistant professor of Africana Studies at Bloomfield College. She holds a PhD in African American and African Studies with a concentration in urban education from Michigan State University, or as we say around here, the other MSU. Her interdisciplinary research explores educational equity, Black studies pedagogies, language and resistance, and the impacts of experiential learning experiences such as study-away programs. She is also a dedicated educator and mentor, recognized for her innovative teaching and commitment to student success. Outside of work, Dr. Gaines is a proud wife, dog mom, and horror movie enthusiast. We're also lucky today that Professor Elizabeth Rivera from the Department of Educational Foundations is going to serve as a discussant and offer some responses to Professor Gaines's presentation. As some of you already know, Professor Rivera is an associate professor of quantitative research methods in the Department of Educational Foundations. She holds a joint PhD in urban systems with a concentration in urban educational policy and in economics from Rutgers University, Newark. She also has an MS in social research from Hunter and a BA in economics from Barnard College, Columbia. So, like a real dummy. Thank you, Liz. As an economist of education, her scholarly interests include the economics of urban education, residential and school segregation, and structural educational inequities by race and ethnicity. Her research is sponsored by the Spencer Foundation, and she is a fantastic scholar, and I know she'll have a lot to say in response to Professor Gaines's presentation. So without any more from me, please join me in welcoming Professor Gaines.
Thank you, and I'm excited to see everyone in person and on Zoom today. Just unlocking my iPad here. Alrighty, so my name is Leah Gaines, and the title of my presentation is Transformative Learning in an Anti-DEI Era. This is a paper that I'm still fleshing out, so today I'm sharing what I have so far. So since 2022, I have been taking students around the United States to study Black histories, cultures, and experiences. Some of the places that we have been include the Gullah Geechee Cultural Corridor, Louisa, Puerto Rico, New Orleans, where, amongst many things, students research Gullah Geechee language, foodways, herbal practices, the ways that Afro-Puerto Ricans experience environmental racism, Haitian influences on New Orleans culture, and Black architecture in New Orleans. So on the screen, you'll see myself and my students on the left. We are, at the top, we are on the McLeod Plantation in South Carolina. We're currently walking through the slave quarters. At the bottom, we are about to board a ferry to head to Sapelo Island. In the middle, we are in Louisa, which is an Afro-Puerto Rican community right outside of San Juan, Puerto Rico. And within Louisa, there's a beachside community called Piñones, which is also Afro-Puerto Rican, and we're at the bottom in that community learning bamba, which is a dance and drumming that is traditionally Afro-Puerto Rican. And then on the far right, you'll see us in New Orleans. At the top, we are in the historic neighborhood of Treme, a historically Black community in New Orleans. And at the bottom, we are in Studio B, which is an art museum, which has like a social justice emphasis in New Orleans. So I typically plan for my study away classes about a year in advance. So in 2024, when I was planning for 2025, I had no idea what the social political climate would be in Washington, D.C. In 2025, Donald Trump was inaugurated as the 47th President of the United States. And with this transition came a shift to conservative politics, the dismantling of diversity, equity, inclusion, and attempts to undo many progressive initiatives. So one example out of many, there was a Black Lives Matter plaza that was permanently uprooted to reflect the beliefs of the new leadership in the Republican-led Congress. So on the left, you'll see the Black Lives Matter plaza that was in Washington, D.C. In the middle, you'll see where it was permanently uprooted in March 2025. And then in June 2025, myself and my students went to Washington, D.C. We are right outside of the Capitol that was stormed by protesters a few years prior. So coinciding with this period of heightened socio-political tension, I took a cohort of undergraduate Floridian students through a summer study away course to Washington, D.C., which was designed to immerse them in the histories, cultures, and experiences of Black people of the district, formerly known as Chocolate City, which was a nickname given to the area for its rich Black presence. Like the conservative federal government, local Florida policies where we were from also aimed to halt the critical discussions of race in college classrooms. But in defiance, the course provided a context for encouraging students to engage with complex social and political realities outside of the traditional classroom while researching everything Black in the nation's capital. So this presentation will explore the following questions. 1, what transformative learning moments emerge when students engage with Black history, culture, and community spaces in Washington, D.C.? And what can undergraduate students gain from a study away experience in Washington, D.C.? So the photo here, the students are walking into the White House, so we did tour the White House. And one thing I didn't know is I recently came to Bloomfield College. So before I was here, I came here in August 2025. Before I was here, I was at a university in Central Florida. So these are Floridian students. So of the 9 students enrolled in the course, 8 consented to participate in my research project. The 8 participants include Ann Shaw, Christopher, Hannah, Jackson Oz, Corrine, Leela May, Nikki, and Rosemary. All the names are pseudonyms. The students came from a variety of backgrounds, including South Asian American, African American, Haitian American, White American, and Egyptian. Some of the students were first-generation immigrants, international students, traditional, non-traditional, heterosexual, and queer. The students were largely pre-med, interdisciplinary studies, and diversity studies majors. The diversity studies no longer exist at that institution. Most of the students were upperclassmen, seniors, and juniors. Some students came to the course with no prior knowledge of Black history, cultures, and experiences, while others had some interest in social justice and an eagerness to learn more about Black DC. On the screen, you'll see myself and my students in DC. At the top, we're at the National Archives, the gentleman in the gray shirt. He introduced the students to some of the archival materials that are housed at the National Archives. At the bottom, we were visiting Ben's Chili Bowl, which is a historically Black, it's on U Street, which is a historically Black area known for arts and performances, music, and the restaurant is a Black-owned restaurant. And then the longer picture, we are right outside of the White House before we took our tour. So this qualitative case study is shaped by critical race theory, experiential learning theory, and transformative learning theory. Critical race theory centers the ways that race, racism, and power operate within social structures, institutions, and everyday experiences. CRT foregrounds the permanence of racism and the need to examine how racialized history shape contemporary realities. In the context of this study, CRT provides a lens for understanding how students interpret the socio-political histories and experiences of Washington, D.C. during a period that was marked by public challenges to Black history and cultural expression. Experiential learning theory is concerned with how experiences shape learning and how knowledge is gained through transformative encounters with the world. Transformative learning theory emphasizes that quality education should not merely inform, but transform students' relationships to others, to themselves, and to the world around them. Learning in these views is not passive, but an active process involving experience and reflection. The Study Away course to Washington, D.C. positions the city itself as a pedagogical site, one in which students encounter history, politics, and culture in real time. Through site visits, community engagement, and structured reflection, students interpreted events, questioned assumptions, and connected lived experiences to academic and personal contexts. So to collect data for this study, 8 of the undergraduate participants enrolled in the summer study away were interviewed across multiple focus groups during and at the conclusion of the study away course. Students were asked to reflect on their experiences at each site visit, and then a thematic analysis was conducted to identify recurring patterns in student processes and student responses. So on the screen, you'll see myself with my students at the DC Archives, which is separate from the National Archives. This is more like a state archive. Dr. Lopez Matthews on the right at the top with the lanyard on, he allowed the students to engage directly with birth certificates, marriage license, different artifacts and materials that were held at this location. And for most of the students, this was their first time in an archive, actually. So after coding the focus groups for interviews, multiple themes emerged. I noticed that students gained political awareness, students learned beyond the classroom, students gained personal development, and students experienced transformative learning. On the right, you'll see the students right outside of a building on Howard University's campus. Howard University is a historically black university. They're receiving a tour from an undergraduate student. In the middle, I'm going to play this quick clip. One of the places that we visited was the Go-Go Museum and Cafe. And while there, they were able to learn how to play and learn about the politics surrounding go-go music. The gentleman that is going to be sitting at the drum set, he's the tour guide. The gentleman on the bongos is the student. Go-go is unique to DC, so this is their first time interacting with go-go music. He eventually got it. So political awareness. The study away introduced students to unique cultural dimensions of civic life in Washington, D.C. For example, when visiting the Go-Go Museum, the students were exposed to the politics behind go-go music and the Don't Mute D.C. movement.
Going into it, I didn't really know, honestly, I didn't know anything about go-go music, and it was really interesting to learn how much it affected D.C. or honestly just the nation in general.
So Rosemary was referring to the Don't Mute DC movement, which was a grassroots campaign that emerged in response to gentrifiers' attempts to silence go-go music in a historically black neighborhood. So the cell phone store, since the 90s, this cell phone store, a Metro PCS store, they would play go-go music from loudspeakers. But the people who moved in, largely white people who moved into the neighborhood, were unfamiliar with the already established culture. And so they will often report the cell phone store to the police and to the Metro PC's National Center. The local people fought back with what became known as the Don't Mute DC movement. The Don't Mute DC movement became a symbol of resistance against cultural erasure and gentrification, and it underscored how music and public space can serve as platforms for civic expression and community empowerment. So Rosemary's reflection illustrates how cultural engagement can expand students' understanding of political awareness and everyday acts of advocacy that are embedded in local traditions. Students also learned beyond the classroom, so the physical and social environment of Washington, D.C. played a role in shaping students' learning experiences beyond the traditional classroom setting. During a visit to the Frederick Douglass National Historic Site, students toured Douglass's home and learned about his life, leadership, and legacy. And Christopher reflected on how this experience expanded his understanding of Douglass beyond the public figure that is often portrayed in textbooks.
You know, I also like learning a little bit more about his personal life that you wouldn't really know, like the way like the grandchildren will refer to him, he'd play on the floor in one room, be doing business in the other room. It was cool to learn not only about like his professionalism that I didn't know, but also behind the scenes, like how he was a family man.
So as Christopher was speaking, he's pointing to the spaces in Douglas's home that he just walked through. And learning outside the classroom, the students were able to immerse in the history, standing in Douglas's home and hearing stories from those who continue to preserve his legacy today. At the bottom, you'll see us right in front of Frederick Douglass's home, so before we enter to tour. And then at the top, we are touring the Go-Go Museum.
Going into it, I didn't really...
Personal development. The study away also prompted a deeper connection between students' emerging professional identities and their personal histories. So Corrine and Ann Shaw, who both aspire to become physicians, they reflected on how the trip not only expanded their awareness of social contexts that shape healthcare, but also helped them feel more grounded in their own journeys.
Professionally, I think that a lot of things I learned on the trip will help me be more aware and mindful of my work I do in the future as a physician. And I think it'll also help me be more grounded and not struggle so much with imposter syndrome as well, because I have a history of people along who have paved the way for me.
Now one more from Ann Shaw.
The work that she did, I always knew she was critical for the African American movement here and for liberating and educating minorities, but I did not know her humanitarian work internationally. So it was really very cool to see, and her love for elephants was also really sweet. And just the fact that, like, she did everything despite being told no, like, she turned her rejection into the fuel that she needed. So I feel like as minorities, that kind of grit is always inspirational. And without leaders like her, we wouldn't be where we are. And I'm really happy and grateful for her work.
So Corrine and Ann Shaw's reflections illustrate how personal development is not only about acquiring knowledge or skills, but also about cultivating a sense of belonging and purpose. So by recognizing themselves as part of a broader historical continuum, shaped by the resilience and contributions of those who came before them, they began to reframe their sense of self and professional potential. Their experiences underscore how study away programs can affirm students' identities while equipping them to enter the world and their career fields with greater confidence, cultural humility, and a deeper sense of responsibility. Transformative learning moments. Throughout the study away experience, students encountered moments of personal transformation that shifted their worldview and self-understanding. The students articulated meaningful shifts in how they understood issues of justice, governance, and civic responsibility. Importantly, many students connected these insights to long-term aspirations, noting how the experiences influenced their academic trajectories, career goals, leadership roles, and commitments to public service or advocacy.
Yes, I learned a lot about her and her impact in both Florida and DC, but I kind of took more personal stuff away. Like, first, she didn't really seem to take no for an answer. So like in my leadership roles on campus, I actually do have to like get funding for a lot of things, and it's hard, especially right now in Florida, getting funding for a Black organization. But like, I mean, she was getting it from people who low-key were probably racist, the way she worded it. So it's like you have to keep going and keep trying different ways. And then also the fact that she opened up her personal home to people, like for these meetings, because she knew stuff had to get done. That's just something I'm taking away, because coming into this school year with e-board positions that are a little controversial in our state, I think it's just important to look at someone and see like you can still do it even in a controversial environment.
So Nikki's response reveals how transformative learning can be rooted in recognition and seeing someone they idolize navigate and resist structural inequities. In a political climate where student-led Black organizations face increasing scrutiny and funding challenges, especially in states like Florida, where Nikki is from, Nikki found both validation and motivation during the study away. Her takeaway underscores how representation and lived examples can empower students to persist, adapt, and lead with conviction, even in environments that feel hostile to their identities and missions. So A few of the examples they were they were talking about was Mary McLeod Bethune, and we had toured Mary McLeod Bethune's home at the top. You'll see us outside of the National Council for Negro Women, which was also her home, but is now the headquarters for the organization. And then we also visited the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture at the bottom, which is a huge museum, and we didn't have time to see the whole thing in just a few hours, but it was still nice.
The work that she did.
Sorry. So what does all this mean? In an anti-Black era of DEI rollbacks, a Defiant Study Away course to Washington, D.C. allowed students to immerse themselves in cultural sites relevant to the histories, experiences, and cultures of Black Washingtonians. The Study Away course became a site of transformative learning that fostered knowledge creation, development, and student growth, experiences that can't be replicated through sanitized curricula. So on the right, we were visiting Ben's Chili Bowl. The woman standing next to me is one of the owners of the restaurant, and she was so excited to see us there. She showed us a documentary, and she took pictures with us, and it was just beautiful. The documentary was about like the creation of the museum, of the restaurant, and then some of the famous people who have come, the history, it being on U Street, a historically Black area for Black arts. So what's next? This summer, session F, I will be leading Bloomfield College's first Africana Studies Summer Institute. It's a 4-week program where students can earn credits for 2 Africana Studies courses while engaging in weekly day trips that transform the tri-state area into a living classroom. We'll visit the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in Harlem, one of the world's premier archives of the African diaspora. We'll go to the Weeksville Heritage Center in Brooklyn, which is a site that preserves the history of one of the first free Black communities in America. We'll stand in Hinchcliffe Stadium in Paterson, New Jersey, one of the last remaining Negro League baseball stadiums in the country. And we'll also engage with collections at the Youth Museum that will help us learn more about the contributions of Negro League baseball players. These activities aim to connect our students to archives, monuments, and cultural sites that affirm their histories. This opportunity is open to Montclair and Bloomfield campus students, so I hope that you're able to share this information with your students, and maybe we'll see them this summer. And at this moment, I would like to thank you. I appreciate your time and for listening, and thank you for having me today.
You're so much taller than me. Okay. Thank you so much. That was great. It's a really strong and timely talk. What I appreciate the most is that you're not just talking about study abroad, but you're actually talking about it as exposure and enrichment, which we don't really hear a lot about. You're showing us that it can function as a critical site of learning, and especially when it's grounded in critical race theory and experiential learning theory. That combination really comes through in the programs that you talked about and how you designed it and how students are making meaning of these experiences. The 2 things that really stood out for me was first the findings that you discussed around transformative learning, identity development, and political awareness. What's compelling is that there aren't just abstract claims that you're talking about. You really bring them to life with the quotes. I'm gonna have to steal that a little bit. I like the fact that they actually spoke, like you could hear it and read it at the same time. That was excellent. The quotes made it clear that students are not just describing what they did, but how they're interpreting those experiences in relation to race, power, and their own identities. And then that reflection aligns really clearly with both your theoretical, or all 3 of your theoretical frames. Second, this idea of learning beyond the classroom, and what your work shows is that it's not just about being in DC, or in this instance, right? It's about how DC is structured as a learning environment, right? And you gave a little bit of history behind why U Street and the places that you took them to. I think that experiential component isn't neutral, right? You actually obviously curated and guided it, and it's critically framed for the students, and it seems like they really came away with all of that as well, so that makes it really meaningful. And I'll just add that it also raises a question about how institutions are measuring impact, right? Because these types of outcomes that you're looking at, they're not always something that we're looking at as post-secondary institutions. You're really talking about identity development, critical consciousness, political awareness, and those are typically things that we're looking for and measuring when we're looking at how post-secondary education is impacting our students. And they don't always translate neatly into the metrics that we look at, right? And especially the ones that we tend to privilege or institutions tend to privilege. So there's this real tension around what counts as evidence that you're talking about and whose definitions matter and that impact. One thing that I want to push on a little bit, as I'm amazing, the DC trip, and I'm going to have to ask you all about Puerto Rico later. As programs like this continue to gain traction, and you're in New York City, we're going to talk about that later too. How do we prevent them from becoming more superficial versions of themselves instead of this obvious critical sites that you're taking them to and with the intention that you're doing it? How do we continue to make them high impact, not just from the outside, but for our students and coming away with these experiences that they so clearly discussed? I'm just curious how you think about maintaining that depth and that intentionality, especially as we're moving away from DEI because of the political climate, and how we continue to push our students to think about all of these very controversial subjects in the real world, because you're putting them out there. So I'm just curious to think about how you're thinking about that. For me, your talk wasn't just about study abroad. It was a reminder that this type of work is actually possible, especially with our undergraduates, which I thought was amazing. So the real question is, what can institutions do, and what are we willing to risk to make sure that this is continued to be done properly and with this sort of intention and critical thought?
Yeah, so to the last part, so I honestly don't know how I was still able to lead the class in 2025, but I did it. I think the major reason that I was able to is because the word diversity was not in the title of the class. There was no race in the title of the class. And at the time, they were not, you didn't have to publicly post your syllabi, right? So I did it, and I continued it, and I told the students, like, so technically what we're doing, they already know, some of them are diversity studies majors, which they know doesn't exist anymore for a reason, right? We continue doing it in ways that we can, right? If you can change a few things to make it acceptable in order to run it, right? Whereas technically you're in Florida, you're not supposed to do CRT, but I told the students if they wanted to, it's not mandatory, right? But if you'd like to, go ahead and take it on. So the course itself is a research course, right? So the students take on different topics and whatever it is they want to study within this context, right? So they come from different majors, different areas of experience, different areas of interest. They take that and turn it into a research topic. I originally started a study away back in 2021, but it was canceled because of COVID. That course was not a research course, but there was a community immersion where they were to meet with an after-school program, and they were supposed to work with the students in that after-school program, right? So there's always some type of responsibility placed on the student also to be continuing to think critically, whether it is them engaging with communities directly, so the after-school program, or them having to share their research project and say, here's why this type of work is important, here's how it impacted me, here's what I took from it, here's why we should continue doing it. I hope that answered the question. Okay.
Should I?
We can open it up to the audience for questions, comments.
Do I, or do you?
Yeah, Leah, why don't you do it?
Okay. And tell me your name when you speak.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Kelly Perez.
Kelly.
So my question is, I think that it's really great that it's so interdisciplinary, that there are students from all different types of majors. So my question is, what is the value of opening the doors to experiential learning for students who come from all different backgrounds when it comes to developing political awareness?
Yeah. So a lot of the students, some of the students were international students, so they had no understanding of Black history in the United States at all, right? So I think that's important. The different it's exposing students to perspectives that they had never heard before. And even students who might have learned some things might have learned it from a certain perspective, right? And they're able to learn that same idea, that same topic, but from a new perspective, right? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that did.
Okay, and if I didn't, just restate it. Okay, because once I start talking, I don't even know where I was going. Okay, I was excited. Thank you.
Hello, mine leans a little more towards your methods and methodology. Specifically, you should never give me a microphone. Leaning more towards methods and methodology, if you could talk to us about your recruitment. Did everyone who you reached out to say yes? Were there hiccups? And especially, you've got people, you say it was a global group in Florida, and then to travel north to DC, just how did that come about?
Yeah, so first, I created the course for the course to be inclusive, right? Meaning, typically, when students think about a global learning, they think about study abroad, which means studying internationally, right? I was working at a university that had a large international student population, a large population of students who were undocumented, right? And with these populations, sometimes it's almost impossible to get either visas or passports to travel, right? So to leave the country kind of becomes impossible for some students. But the United States is extremely diverse, right? There are many pockets where you're in them and you might not even feel like you're in the United States, right? The places that we've been to, the Gullah Geechee Cultural Corridor, where the language is different. Puerto Rico, where the language is different, right? The food is different. The culture is different. So you still can get a global experience in the United States, right? And then also it's much more affordable to allow the students to travel within the United States. Now, in terms of participants, I ask all the students, I tell them up front, you don't have to, it is not mandatory, you can do it if you want to, you do not have to do it, and it doesn't impact your grade either way, right? Usually the students are excited to participate because students like to read about themselves and, hear their impact, but one student didn't, and it was okay. She didn't want to, she didn't have to, and that was the end of it, right? And at any point, they could have said, I don't really want to answer this question, or I don't want, the students who did agree to participate could say, I don't want to participate anymore, and that would have been totally fine too. And it was that way I've done this for a few years now, and usually there's one student who doesn't want to, and it's okay. Mm-hmm. Did that answer your question?
It did.
Okay.
So thinking about the transformational aspect and what your goals were for the students and also the research, how did you come to select in the places where you visit? Because DC is rich with a lot of resources. And then even when you're talking about your summer initiative, how are you selecting those?
The locations?
Yes.
So the different locations I chose for different reasons, right? The first thing is I had to be strategic in terms of picking places that sound exciting to students,
Okay.
right? Because I want them to sign up. This is not a mandatory course. This is a course that students are enrolling in because they want to take it, right? So I chose places like New Orleans because everybody loves New Orleans. The food, the things to do in New Orleans is exciting to students. Same thing with Puerto Rico, same thing with the Gullah Geechee Cultural Corridor. And actually, I think I was more excited about the Gullah Geechee Cultural Corridor than some of the students, and that was because I grew up watching Gullah Gullah Island. And I was like, this is my opportunity to share my excitement with my students. And then Washington, D.C., same thing. These are Southern students, right? Besides the international students, this group was very diverse, but some of the students I've taken to other places, sometimes they've never left their state, they have maybe never left their city, so getting out into these places is visibly, Washington, D.C. looks drastically different from Florida, right? From the architecture to the people, everything looks different. So I picked these places because I wanted students to be in places that were culturally different from themselves.
And then the places, so within those respective cities and states, how did you organize?
We go straight to where the black people live. Yeah, so in Puerto Rico, I knew the black people were in Louisa and Piñones, so that's where we have to go. In Washington, D.C., we go to the HBCU, we go to the black-owned restaurants, we go to U Street, we go to the Go-Go Museum, we go to places that value Black history, cultures, and experiences, and where we can be immersed in the lived experiences of the people. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Tonnette. I wrote down 3 things. The first
Okay.
was thank you for elevating the rich Black history that is a part of the United States and multiple portions and regions of the United States. I just wanted to bring your attention to the steakhouse in Bloomfield that was part
yeah.
of the Underground Railroad, so you could start there with a nice dinner
Mm-hmm.
this summer, okay, if your grant allows for that. And also the fact that I've been here for 7 years, relocating from New Jersey, but lived in New Mexico for 35 years. And so I see the need for the elevation and empowerment of young Black people here in New Jersey. I feel a sense of hopelessness among them. They don't see themselves in the future. And I can say that even from Montclair State University. I don't see it, I don't feel it from the students in the way that they could feel it, given that we're in New Jersey. So I thank you for being here. One of the things that I am pushing for is, okay, so we have Africana studies. How do you integrate that major or minor into our majors? For instance, I work to integrate Africana studies into the College of Education at the University of New Mexico. So if you take an Africana studies course, it can also count as a teacher ed course, because we have a long, rich history of education in the United States that goes back to the 1800s. How do you do the same in other professions that are offered here on campus? And so I welcome you to be here to push for that as opposed to a separate standalone, because we know how the business of higher education works. And I want to see this as something that's integrated and is historically here for as long as beyond when I'm alive. Okay?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So,
And interdisciplinary study, Africana studies at its core is interdisciplinary, right? And I'm about to put somebody on the spot, so I hope they're okay with this, Joseph. But in my classes, I always make the students think about how Africana studies is relevant to their experiences, is relevant to their career goals, is relevant to their aspirations, right? And so, can I put you on the spot? All right, appreciate it. So Joseph is in my 233 course, African Americans, medical experimentation and medical racism and unethical experimentation, right? And Joseph always makes the connections between what we learn in the course, and his major, which is what? Biology, right? Because he is an aspiring physician, right? So he's able to make those connections between how is Africana studies relevant to your coursework, to your career, and it's relevant to all of it, right? And I always like to give people examples of people who have majored or minored in Africana studies, such as Michelle Obama, who took it into law, right? The mayor of New York, Zoran Mondami, who took it into politics, right? Mae Jemison, who is a scientist and a astronaut, right? So it literally applies to every aspect of life, every career goal, and so it is relevant to all these majors, minors, and student aspirations.
I'm just saying, make it known, make your presence known.
Absolutely.
Okay. Love
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you.
Imagine if all of a sudden the leadership change, all of a sudden DEI can start to come back. But transformative learning needs to be an important part when DEI comes back. What will happen until then?
Say your question one more time.
What I'm trying to say is, once DEI comes back, there's a leadership change, say that, well, we're going to DEI to come back. Will transformative learning be incorporated into that way?
So Joseph is very optimistic, and he said, what happens when DEI comes back, right? Meaning, we notice trends in politics. Some things are popular, like a few years ago, DEI was the thing everybody should do. Maybe up until a few years ago, now it is the thing no one should do, right? But when it comes back, we're going to still be doing what we do, right? Because we don't stop, right?
It's an idea. I think it's an idea. It doesn't stop anything else.
Exactly, exactly. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you so much for your talk, Dr. Gaines. John representing the Center for Teaching and Academic Innovation. I guess now is a really perfect time to maybe segue into pedagogy, and I would really love to pick your brains in terms of how your students have informed how you're thinking about pedagogy in today's context, right? And kind of like related to that, how is your research going, like where you are in the research process? And then lastly, for faculty who, let's say, want to do work, but they may not have the means or the funds, and they may have to be local, right? And maybe what are ways that maybe faculty can be like thinking about similar work, whether it's modes of inquiry, critical consciousness raising, or even like experiential learning. Maybe what advice would you have to offer to colleagues both at Montclair as well as Bloomfield?
Yeah, so I think the Africana Studies Institute is a good example of this, right? So at my previous institution, our program mostly paid for this study away, right? But I don't have that luxury here, right? But to get around costs, instead we're doing free things, right? So we're going to the Schomburg Center, which is free. We had to pay for transportation, but that's minimal considering, you know, larger costs that could have been included. Places like the Youth Museum will be free for us because it's Montclair operated now, right? And then the Weeksville Heritage Center, again, some of these locations are free. So are relationships, meaning relationships with communities are free, right? So I'm still new in New Jersey, but I'm trying to build partnerships with organizations off campus so that we can have these built-in relationships so that we can continue to have our students learn from community organizations, from people within the community. And then the same thing, inviting the community to our campus and engaging with our students on our campus. And then to answer your question about the teaching practices, I just think about what is it that students either want to learn or need to learn, and how can I get them to want to do it? So what will make it exciting, what will make it fun, and what will make it so that they are excited, not just like, oh, I have to do it because it's a CEEDS core requirement or a gen ed or something, but something that they actually want to do. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hi everyone, Zoe Burkholder again. I have a couple of questions and comments to share from our Zoom room, which has over 30 people in it.
Oh, wow.
By the way. Let me see. Okay, so the first question, this is a really interesting one, especially if I can move this. Okay. Hi, Dr. Tonnette Gaines. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. I'm curious, how much of an impact do you think the ghost of affirmative action has had on the current DEI rollbacks? And do you see DEI being rebranded under a different name moving forward? And I'll read a couple more comments. I'll just read them all together, and then you can kind of pick which to respond to. Otherwise, we'll be here all day.
Okay.
I have two different folks who are expressing profound admiration for your pedagogy and the work that you have created here with the experiential learning. They're especially appreciative of the diversity of the students who participate and the way that we as the audience get to hear about how your experiences that you've brought with the classes you're running have really impacted how the students understand themselves, the world around them, and their professional career. The idea that, you know, future doctors and educators and policymakers and all these people are having the opportunity to do this work with you is really, really important. People are excited for that. Denise O'Shea, who's the Dean of the Library here at Montclair State University, would like you to know that the University Libraries has free museum passes for some area museums, and she would be delighted to partner with you to support your effort. So I can help put you in touch with her if you like. And last of all is my own question, which is, I am so impressed by all of this work you're doing. There are some folks here on campus who are doing similar work. We have a Native American and Indigenous Studies field school this summer that is 4 weeks of similar work to what you're doing, but with Native American local communities in New Jersey, and some travel there and some hands-on community service. So it'll be great, if you're interested, to put you in conversation with them. I was wondering if you wanted to share with us a little bit about how you see using this work in your research? In other words, like when you write your journal articles, when you write your books, what do you think is the takeaway from this that you want other scholars to know?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things to take away, right? So not only is DEI facing backlash, but so is Black Studies, right? So I think that these type of courses, they share the importance of courses like Black Studies courses, courses where students are exposed to experiences that are different from theirs, right? And then I also think it is important for students because typically I always get juniors, but usually seniors. So sometimes juniors and seniors, but certainly there are students who are at the end of their college career. And I think it's important for these students to go back and tell the freshmen and sophomores, right? Like, if you didn't sign up for an experiential learning, or if you don't do these types of classes, you need to do it at the beginning or at any point, right? But certainly at some point, right? I think that's important. And then also, I think it is important to show the diverse ways that we can share new information or share information about cultures, share information about communities. Yeah, did that answer the question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do you have a question?
Because we talk a lot about like critical race theory, we talk a lot of these ideas. Some people may construe that and say, oh, because you're just promoting communism. Because some people can say that. You know, in reality, it can be a different way. And it's important to understand, like, not just about what the ideas are, about why they're saying things the way they are. So how do you address these people saying, oh, there's a communist, so even though reality, you have to peel back a little bit and say, what does it mean overall? How do you address that?
Yeah, so, you know, interestingly enough, I don't get those students, right? I don't get the students who don't see value in these perspectives or don't see value from learning about people different from themselves or people the same as themselves, right? But the outsiders, okay, I'm gonna rewind a little bit. When I was in grad school, I worked at a community college. It was in a small rural area, and I was very young. I was like 26 years old, right? And most of the students were non-traditional, and a lot of them were like veterans, so 26-year-old, but in a class with some students who are my age or older. And I was teaching cultural diversity to students who, for the most part, this was their first time having a Black teacher ever, right? And it was stressful to try to change the hearts and minds of people. So I don't take on that responsibility anymore. I did it already, and I'm not stressing myself out. I would like to live for a long time. And I don't, the classes I teach, sometimes they are electives, or you have a choice of taking it. If you don't want to, it's not my job to convince you to want to take it. But if you're open to learning new things, I invite students to take the courses. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it gets you to a whole new perspective. Because some people, because I know, like, if you look at the entire history of the 20th century, because sometimes there are some people who are communists, you know, they're trying to make equality, like Angela Davis is an example.
Okay.
Yeah, because she joined up the Black Panther Party, she was a communist at the time. So it's important to understand, like, okay, why she didn't believe these things. It's just like, oh, because this is bad, this is good. No, we have to understand why they think they're this way.
Yeah, absolutely.
The reason why she went these ideas was equality, because segregation at the time, immigration, all those kinds of values.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Joseph.
Okay.
I think we're about out of time. So I just wanted to thank Dr. Gaines. Thank you, Dr. Gaines, so much for joining us. You know, Dr. Gaines, as you all know, is at Bloomfield College in the Africana Studies, which is wonderful for us at Montclair State University. We don't have a Department of Africana Studies here, so we are delighted to welcome you and work with you. I hope that's clear from the folks who have shown up here and in the Zoom meeting, but there's a lot of people who are really excited to meet you, to learn about your scholarship, so thank you for coming today. This was a really excellent presentation. Thanks very much to those of you who joined us here and online. A special thanks to Professor Rivera. Those were some very insightful comments that she was whipping up really fast, typing on her phone during this talk. And so, yes, all of your training is not for nothing. Apparently, you can pull that off perfectly, beautifully, and easily. So thank you. I think that's it for today. Thanks again, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.